Breaking news coming out today is take a look. Iran warns that attack on Khamenei would be a declaration of war. President issues warning amid speculation that Donald Trump plans to assassinate or remove the supreme leader. This coming out today, and I shared with you yesterday that we had heard rumors that this was happening, that the United States will be striking Iran and will be planning the assassination of the supreme leader. Now, I shared with you this was circulating around Israeli news. Now, today we're hearing Iran is responding, saying there will be a declaration of war by Iran on the United States if this unfolds. Now, this comes as, take a look at the latest headlines also coming out today. Anti-regime activists, they have hacked Iran's national broadcast and transmitted Pahlavi's call to protests. We are hearing that the TV broadcasting was hacked, taken over, and they aired his speech encouraging protesters to take to the streets. Now, simultaneously, we are still hearing that Donald Trump of the United States is saying all options are on the table. U.S. boosts its presence in the Middle East as Iran's strike remains a possibility. We're hearing U.S. forces are still on their way to the Middle East. And take a look at this. He hoped that Trump's help would arrive. Why protesters in Iran feel betrayed. The Iranian protesters, they have been hoping that those hits would come already. We have not seen them come yet. And take a look. The order never came. Behind the scenes of Trump's Iran pullback. But we're going to be seeing some video footage coming out here in just the past hour today, January 18th, 2026, as they're saying all options are still on the table. And it could be that President Donald Trump is just getting everything in position, ready to go. But we still yet might see those strikes. And as I shared with you yesterday, it is rumored that it is going to happen. We're hearing senior U.S. officials have shared with Israeli news channels that an attack is coming. Iran is now getting word of this and saying, if you attack, especially the supreme leader, this is an official declaration of war. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are we going to be entering into war here very soon? If you think so, put war in the comments. If you think no, put peace. Let me know your thoughts, but I'm going to get you caught up on the latest so you can see exactly what is going on today. Now, before we dive in, do me a quick favor. If you appreciate the updates, please take a second, hit that thumbs up like button for me. Just helps spread out the live stream on YouTube while we're on right now. Also, subscribe to stay up to date on everything. It's totally free. And here on the channel, as you know, I cite the sources, put it on the screen, read right from it, so that way you can see it for yourself and know and rest assured that this is the latest. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. And let's go ahead and start off with this article so that way you can see the warning that has been issued by Iran today. It says, Iran warns that an attack on Khamenei would be declaration of war. President issues a warning amid speculation that Donald Trump is planning to assassinate or remove the supreme leader. And I would imagine they would be very concerned with this after what we saw unfold with Maduro. Let's go ahead and take a look. Now, this says the Iranian president, Mossad Pezeshkian, warned on Sunday that any attack on the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, would be a declaration of war. In an apparent response to speculation that Donald Trump is considering an attempt to assassinate or remove Khamenei, Pezeshkian said on post on X, an attack on the great leader of our country is tantamount to a full-scale war with the Iranian nation. The Iranian president also blamed the U.S. for the protests that have rocked Iran over the last 2 weeks and led to thousands of deaths among demonstrators. If there are hardship and constraints in the lives of the dear people of Iran, one of the main causes is the long-standing hostility and inhumane sanctions imposed by the U.S. government and its allies, Pezeshkian said. Trump, in an interview with Politico on yesterday, called for an end to Khamenei's nearly 40-year reign, calling him a sick man who should run his country properly and stop killing people. The latest wave of unrest in Iran began on the 28th of December when widespread anger over soaring inflation, a collapsing currency, and economic hardships spilled out of Tehran and into the cities across the country, rapidly transforming demonstrations over living costs into broad anti-government protests demanding regime change. As the movement grew, Iranian authorities responded on January 8th with a near total shutdown of the internet and phone services. cutting off most global connectivity in an effort to suppress communication, obscure the scale of the unrest, and stifle independent reporting, leaving many Iranians isolated from the outside world. Now, last Tuesday, Trump urged Iranians to keep protesting and to take over your institutions, telling them help is on the way, as reports grew that a strike on Iran was imminent. Now, on Wednesday, the U.S. came close to launching military strikes on Iran, but ultimately pulled back as Trump opted to pause amid mounting regional and diplomatic pressure. The U.S. news website Axios reported that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had warned Trump that Israel was not prepared for Iranian retaliation and questioned the effectiveness of a U.S. strike. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had also urged restraint, according to Axios, citing the risks to the regional stability. It was really close, a U.S. official told Axios, adding that the order to strike never came. Now, in a social media post on Friday, Trump thanked Tehran's leaders, claiming they had called off scheduled executions of 800 people, including that of Irfan Sartani, 26, the first Iranian protester sentenced to death since the unrest began. Now, Sartani, a clothing shop employee, was arrested in Karaj, a city northwest of Tehran, after participating in protests and was due to be executed on Wednesday, according to rights groups. Since his arrest, his family had received little news about his condition besides a brief scheduled visit before his expected execution. Now, over the weekend, Saltani's family, they were able to visit him and establish that he was alive. "I am relieved to know that my cousin Irfan is alive," said Saltani's cousin Samayeh, who lives in Germany. "However, I am worried because I received news that he has been tortured under custody and hasn't received medical attention yet. I appeal to the international community to please bring attention to his detention conditions. I also appeal to European politicians to please sponsor his case to demand medical assistance for Irfan. I am also deeply worried for the thousands of other protesters in custody." At least 5,000 people have been killed in protests in Iran, including about 500 security personnel, an Iranian official in the region said on Sunday, citing verified figures and accusing terrorists and armed rioters of killing innocent Iranians. Now, during a speech on Thursday, Khamenei acknowledged for the first time that thousands of people had been killed, some in an inhumane, savage manner. He blamed the United States for the death toll, railing against Trump, whom he called a criminal for his support of the demonstrations and calling for strict punishment of the protesters. Now, on Sunday, monitors said some internet access had been restored in Iran. Traffic data indicates a significant return to some online services, including Google, suggesting that heavily filtered access has been enabled. Corroborating users reported reports of partial restoration, NetBlock said in a social media post. Now, an Iranian official who declined to be named due to the sensitivity of the issue told Reuters some of the heaviest clashes and highest number of deaths had been in the Iranian Kurdish areas in the country's northwest. Kurdish separatists, they have been active there, and flare-ups have been among the most violent in recent periods of unrest. The human rights activist news agency said 24,348 protesters had been arrested in the crackdown. No protests have been reported for days in Iran, where the streets have returned to an uneasy calm. Instead, some Iranians chanted anti-Khamenei slogans from their windows of their homes on Saturday night. The chants reverberated around the neighborhoods in Tehran, Shiraz, and Isfahan, witnesses have said. So there you have it, you guys. We are hearing that they are saying that if the United States strikes, that it would be a declaration of war. Articles like this coming out today, January the 18th, 2026. Now, let's take a look at some video footage so you can see some of the latest coming out as we're hearing that all options are still on the table. The United States still could be planning to strike Iran anytime now, and we've heard circulating around the rumor mill and coming out in Israeli news that the strike is imminent and that the supreme leader, Khamenei, he potentially here could be assassinated. Let's go ahead and take a look.
U.S. strikes killed an al-Qaeda-affiliated operative in Syria on Saturday, who the Pentagon says had direct ties to the ISIS terrorist responsible for killing 2 U.S. service members last month. Meanwhile, President Trump and Ayatollah Ali Khamenei publicly sparring this weekend, with the president saying it's time to look for new leadership in Iran. For more on tensions in the Middle East, let's bring in Fox News contributor General Jack Keane. General, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Delighted to be here.
Happy to have you. So the president said this week that the Iranian regime canceled planned executions of protesters. He dialed back some public statements about the possibility of U.S. military intervention amid these reports we were seeing about concern from Israel and Arab states about potential Iranian retaliation. But the president just this past summer sent B-52 bombers to obliterate Iran's nuclear facilities just 30 hours after letting the world believe that he was going to give a 2-week window for any action. And this week, when Iranian state media broadcast an apparent threat to the president's life, the White House was suspiciously silent on it. Listen to this. It was images of the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, according to reports, with the message, "This time it will not go wrong."
I have not seen that, to be honest with you, Jackie. We'll take a look, and I'll let the president and his national security team examine that footage to ensure its legitimacy. Again, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on it.
Do you think the White House really hadn't seen that threat, or were they maybe just letting Iran believe that the president might not take any action soon?
No, I think the president's been pretty clear here. He intends to hold the Iranian regime accountable to what they're doing to their own people. And I would take him at his word, and certainly the regime should take him at his word. They've completely disregarded it. Obviously, the minimum number of casualties inflicted in terms of people killed now is somewhere around 5,000. Other estimates are even greater than that. Over 20,000 imprisoned for sure. And any thought that they will not kill those who are in prison. All we have to do is go back to the summer. They arrested over 22,000 people after the 12-day war in June, and they hung over 1,500 of them in public displays on the ends of cranes, which was strangleized a person who was being hung like that. And they do that to intimidate the population. There is no doubt that this bloodbath has not ended. And what is actually happening on the ground now, they have brought in Iraqi militia, reported Pakistani and also Afghani militia, in addition to the IRGC, to the Bajaj militia, which they own, to patrol the streets, loudspeakers, and people with machine guns on the corners, making certain that nobody comes out of their residence. If they do, they're going to be shot, and they have shot them. There's only been 2 demonstrations in the last 48 hours, comparable to 200-plus demonstrations being conducted simultaneously until the bloodbath has begun. I believe the president at his word. He intends to hold the regime accountable for what they have done. And I believe, well, why hasn't it happened? Well, I think the reason is also pretty obvious. We are moving assets into the region. And I think it's likely that when the president looks at his military teams, looks at it, you don't just look at the targets that you want to take down in terms of leadership, IRGC, the militias themselves, exporting distribution points for oil, etc. There's plenty of targets. But you also have to consider, Jackie, what is Iran going to do in retaliation? Because they have normally retaliated. Mm-hmm. How do we protect our bases? And what about Israel? Are they going to attack Israel? The reality is likely attack Israel. So we have entered into discussions with Israel, certainly. What does that mean for them? And what likely it means, I'm just speculating, is we expanded the targets to ballistic missiles, which would do damage to us as well as to the Israelis. Make certain that we have all the assets in the region to be able to accomplish that. So anybody's thought here that President Trump has walking away from the red line, he doesn't use that term, but from the threat that he issued to the regime and the ultimatum, I'm going to hold you accountable, if you go after and hurt and kill the Iranian people. That threat is still on the table, and I would take him at his word.
We've got about a minute left, but I want to get your take on Greenland. When the president imposed tariffs on 8 NATO allies yesterday in response to those countries deploying their militaries symbolically to the island amid his pursuit to take Greenland one way or another, there's this delegation of Democratic and Republican lawmakers in Greenland linking arms with the hands-off Greenland protesters, saying that the president's position is being challenged back home. And here's what one member said this week.
The president is talking about spending $700 billion. That's the estimate for Greenland. They're talking about purchasing Greenland. For somebody who considers himself a deal maker, that's a really bad deal for something we can get for nothing.
So that's Democrat Senator Jeanne Shaheen, but we've heard similar sentiments from Republicans too. I want to ask you, why does the U.S. have to own Greenland when you've already got the access there? There's a treaty that would allow the U.S. to expand its military presence pretty much however the president wants, and you've got Denmark welcoming that.
Well, first of all, I mean, multiple presidents over a couple of centuries have looked at Greenland, obviously, as an asset that certainly would be in the United States' vital national interest, largely because of its location. Certainly from China and Russia, which are real threats to us now. Russia had been a threat for a long time. So I think it's always been an aspirational goal and a desirable goal to own it. I understand that. But this is an independent, sovereign country tied to the control of Denmark, which also is an independent, sovereign country and a member of NATO. And I don't think taking it by force is something we're really going to do. I believe that is leverage and negotiation. Listen, the president is somewhat unorthodox in how he goes about making deals, and we've all seen it in the first administration and the second administration. And he uses rhetoric to gain leverage here. Okay. I really think at the end of the day, with some creativity and imagination, we can work an economic and a security deal that will benefit the United States, Greenland, and also Denmark. I do think we can get there, and negotiations have begun, and that's a good thing.
All right, General Jack Keane, always great to talk to you, sir. Thank you so much.
So we have that going on. Greenland, along with today, as I mentioned, we're hearing that Iran is saying that they could be declaring war here if the United States were to try to assassinate the supreme leader, and if we see them start those attacks, as we're hearing that is currently being speculated. We have been hearing in the last 24 hours the rumors circulating that it is being leaked by U.S. senior officials to Israeli news outlets that it is going to happen. The U.S. is preparing, getting positioned. We're hearing that U.S. military assets are on their way to the Middle East right now. Over the course of the next 5 to 7 days, they're going to be fully in position. And when that happens, those attacks will take place. And also, as they mentioned, we've got Greenland going on as well. I'm going to keep you up to speed on that. We actually received yesterday a warning from Russia saying the U.S. is going to start World War III if we attack Greenland. And we're hearing that NATO is saying they're going to get involved in it. And so Russia warning the United States that we could spark World War III. Man, like I said in that video, it's like backwards world. Russia warning the U.S. to de-escalate because they could start a war, World War III, with NATO. Man, let me know your thoughts. But let's go ahead and take a look at some more updates here as we're hearing it's time. Trump urges for new leadership in Iran. And so we're hearing that also Trump had said it's time to get rid of the IRGC and the Supreme Leader. Let's go ahead and take a look.
The death toll in Iran reportedly topping 3,000 since protests started 3 weeks ago as the Ayatollah blames President Trump, threatening him from the bunker where he's reportedly been in hiding since the U.S. strikes last June.
We consider the U.S. president a criminal for the casualties, damages, and the slander he inflicted on the Iranian nation.
President Trump saying enough is enough. Quote, it's time to look for new leadership in Iran. What he is guilty of as a leader of a country is the complete destruction of the country and the use of violence at levels never seen before. The leadership should focus on running his country properly, like I do with the United States, and not killing people by the thousands in order to keep control. Our next guest, Iranian activist and investor, has been advocating heavily for extended family still in Iran. Moj Madara joins us now. Moj, thank you for being here. I want to get to your take on, this war of words between President Trump and Ayatollah Khamenei. But first, you have extended family still in Iran. What are they telling you about the situation there?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me to this important conversation. It's important to bring awareness to what's happened. The numbers actually coming out this morning from Iran International are closer to 16,000 to 20,000 people have been killed, and we're talking about 250,000 plus people injured. We're talking about 1,000 people who have lost an eye. So right now, the Iranian people are facing a death sentence because they are here to change the regime, ask for democracy. They are asking for President Trump's support. They're asking for an intervention, not occupation. They're looking to the sky for American support. And so right now, what I think of what the president is saying to the supreme leader is that it's time to go. And I think he has the full support of the Iranian diaspora. And more importantly, he has the request and the support of the Iranian people who are essentially renaming streets inside Iran. You can see the streets being renamed President Trump. And so I think this leader has to go. He's toxic, not just for his own people, but for the region. And I think he has been a huge, huge thorn in the side of foreign policy for a very long time now.
Moj, this is really quite startling, and you're giving us really on the ground information. 16 to 20,000 is just unthinkable.
Correct.
And the fact that there are streets named for Trump really does talk about how those brave activists, which I have talked about, is remarkable because so many of them are too young to remember anything other than the life under the Islamic regime's brutal control. Where do you see this heading? Like, walk me through, Moj, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario of how this plays out.
My best case scenario is that our democracy, and Washington in particular, kicks out these lobby groups like NIAC and the Quincy Institute, and Trita Parsi, who led the JCPOA, is no longer narrating how this goes in the region. And President Trump leans into his instincts, supports an intervention, supports a regime change. Look, the important thing here is we're tipping power in the hands of the Iranian people themselves. We are doing what they want. We are supporting them because they need the help to tip the balance of power. What I would like is to get the Starlinks that are in the country. There's about 1,000 units. We need to get more. We need to get them activated and in the hands of activists. We need to support communication because, as you know, Huawei, the Chinese company, has supported a suppression. They have an intranet inside the country. So we're talking about, if we do not support the Iranian people, I do want people to consider that for the past 2 decades, we've had the support of the Iranian people on knowing what's going on the ground because they've had access to communication. If they enter a North Korea-style intranet where they're shut out from the world, how will we know what's going on with a regime that's caused so much suffering all over the globe? How will we know?
And that's certainly part of a worst-case scenario.
Well, and then we have an amazing opportunity. We have the Crown Prince that the people are calling as a transitional leader. They are looking to his Iranian Prosperity Project as a transitional plan. It still needs some more input from other regional leaders in the provinces. We need to pull in the Kurdish leadership to help lead this through. But I think this is time, and I think the Gulf states want this. I think people in the region want this. And more importantly, the most important is we have an ally and a friend inside the country called 90 million people, Iranian people, who are begging. If we don't step in and help them, we are essentially saying, first of all, the regime is not that bad, and we're giving them a death sentence.
Moj, the uprising, the protests that we're seeing now, we haven't seen this since 2009. And then President Obama handled this very different than President Trump is. I want to get your reflection on that.
Well, I believe, and I've heard President Obama and Secretary Clinton say that this was a regret, that they did not support the Iranian people at that time. And I think President Trump, as commander-in-chief, has a different opportunity to make history, to make a new ally, to support the Iranian people, to not just do a good thing, but do a smart thing for our foreign policy.
And just lastly, in the few seconds I have, Moj, I do want to ask you, so we heard the President Trump, talk about potentially going so far as airstrikes. And then we saw the president
Yes.
pull back after the 800 executions were paused. But where do you see that heading? Do you think we could be looking at an actual airstrike of some sort?
Well, I believe the president means what he says. And I believe they're probably exploring strategic strikes or drones, and more importantly, collaborating with everyone in the region. So I think he's made a decision where, it's up to him on when and how and what this looks like. But I think with a regime that continues to not just threaten him, but cause chaos across the region, undermine what the Gulf states want in terms of their Vision 2030, we won't have Vision 2030. We won't have a new reset region, and we will continue to have what we have, the suffering for the Palestinian people and a constant threat for the Israeli people if we don't find a way to regime change. And I think it's time that we sort of reset the balance there, support the Crown Prince, get rid of people like Trita Parsi who are in the administration. And I think, listen, we are the most sophisticated country in the world when it comes to technology. I think he can do this without harm. I think he can do this strategically, and most importantly, he has the support of the Iranian diaspora that's ready to invest back into the country. There's 8 million of us that are ready to reinvest, and I think he has 90 million people that have his back.
Moj, our thoughts and prayers are with you and, of course, your extended family
Thank you
in
so much.
Iran. Thank you for being here, Moj Madara.
There you have it. Now, you heard her say that 20, 30,000 deaths, just severely being underreported, as we are hearing some outlets saying that they've estimated a little over 3,000, but it's hard to determine and verify this information because we saw that the internet was cut, but we're hearing today that the internet has been put up in some degree. But take a look here at the latest. We're also hearing an anti-regime activists, they have hacked Iran's national broadcaster, transmit Pahlavi's calls to protest. Anti-regime activists have hacked Iran's Baler satellite, briefly taking over the state TV broadcast to air protest messages and appeal to Rez Pahlavi, according to Iran International and Manato News. So, wow, we're hearing that they have taken over the TV broadcasting and are airing the Persian exiled crown prince. You can see here, January 18th coming out today, anti-regime activists hacked Iran's satellite on Sunday, allowing them to access state TV channels and broadcast exiled crown prince Reza Pahlavi's calls for Iranians to protest against the Islamic Republic, anti-regime outlets reported. The footage was also shared by Pahlavi's media department as well. And here you can see a post coming out on X. Now it says, in the video, the broadcast appears to include messages in Farsi encouraging protesters to continue their activities, media footage of solidarity protests worldwide, and messages of support from international leaders. Here's more posts coming out on X. Now, the video then appeared to show a statement from Pahlavi calling for further protests. Iran International reported that Pahlavi's calls to protests included a call for Iran's military and security forces to side with the protesters. Now, the hacked broadcast was transmitted at approximately 9:30 p.m., Israel's public broadcasters KAN News reported. The broadcast lasted approximately 10 minutes, according to KAN News. So there you have it. We are hearing that today they hacked the broadcast network and they were airing the exiled crown prince, his message to protesters saying, continue on. Now, we're also hearing that they have been a little bit upset at the fact that Trump had paused on a potential strike, but we're hearing that strike is not yet off of the table, and we're going to be seeing what unfolds here. We're hearing that we are still getting positioned. And take a look here at what Senator Ted Cruz had to say. He's saying there is a very real possibility that there is going to be strikes that potentially could be coming here, and that Iran better watch themselves. Go ahead and take a look at the latest.
Joining me now in the Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Maria, good morning. Good to be with you.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, Senator. Let's start with Iran, where dissent right now is being punished. I want to get your take on what President Trump should do regarding Iran.
Well, Maria, I have to say we are living in extraordinary times. The change that is occurring across the globe exceeds anything we have seen in decades. There is a very real possibility that in the next 6 months, the regimes in Iran, in Venezuela, and Cuba will all fall. There is a real possibility that Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba will all democratically elect new leaders, and instead of fomenting violence, fomenting attacks on America, instead of waging war on America, there is a real chance in the next 6 months that the people of those three countries will elect leaders who embrace freedom and free enterprise and who want to stand with America. And I got to say, if that happens, it is difficult to think of anything more consequential. You have to go back to the fall of the Berlin Wall and to America winning the Cold War without firing a shot to find a time as pivotal as where we are right now. If you look at Iran, Iran for 50 years has been the world's leading sponsor of terrorism. They have paid for and funded 90% of the funding of Hamas comes from Iran. 90% of the funding for Hezbollah comes from Iran. Iran funds terrorists all across the globe, including sending terrorists to, among other places, Venezuela, and targeting Americans. Right now, there are over 1 million Iranians that are showing unbelievable courage, standing up against this tyrannical regime. And I got to say, President Trump, I think, has been very strong in telling the regime, number one, we stand with the people. Do not target, do not murder the protesters, telling the protesters, America stands with you. And I got to say, just in the last 2 days, a really important step occurred where President Trump came out unequivocally and said, it is time for new leadership in Iran. Yes. It is time for the Ayatollah Khamenei, his religious dictatorship, to end. I think that's massively important.
So what happens next? Because as you know, Senator, first the president said help is on the way and then pulled back a bit with this expectation that the killings have stopped. At that point, thousands of people had already been killed, and the people on the streets are hoping that the United States does something. Would you endorse that the U.S. goes in and takes action?
Well, look, I think the U.S. should be taking every step possible to end this regime. The Ayatollah Khamenei hates America. He regularly leads massive mobs chanting death to America. In fact, every year in Iran, they celebrate as a holiday Death to America Day. It's the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution and taking over the U.S. Embassy in 1979. And so the reason that President Trump ordered a B-2 attack on Iran's nuclear facilities is he made the right decision as commander-in-chief that if that theocratic dictator got nuclear weapons, the odds were unacceptable that he would use nuclear weapons to murder thousands or even millions of Americans. That was the single most important foreign policy decision the president has made this second term. And when it comes to the protest, I think what is most important is making clear that America is with the people. Contrast this to 2009. 2009, you had the so-called Green Revolution in Iran. The Iranian people were rising up there. But Barack Obama made a very different decision. He was a new president. He decided that America stands with the regime, stands with the Ayatollah, and they discouraged the protests, and we wasted that opportunity. Right now, the president has made clear, he made clear to the Ayatollah, if you are murdering the protesters, you will pay the price. He called on the Iranian people, make a list of everyone engaged in acts of violence. Look, that is powerful because it causes the IRGC members, the soldiers, to pause and think before they carry out those murders. I hope and believe that America is doing everything we can to support the protesters on the ground. There are lots of steps we can and should be taking, short of a bombing strike. And I have every belief that if the Ayatollah engages in mass murder against the protesters, that President Trump will order direct military responses. So this is a moment where the Ayatollah and mullahs, I think they're fundamentally weakened. They are weakened by the fact that last year they lost a war. And you know, sometimes people forget there are real world consequences to losing a war, not just communication, not just messaging, but real world. In the 12-day war, they utterly and completely lost it. If you're a dictator, your strength depends on convincing your people that you are invulnerable, that you cannot be beaten. even worse than losing a war if you're an Islamist dictator, is losing a war to Israel. That's what happened to the Ayatollah, which is why I predicted months ago we would see what we're seeing now, the Iranian people rising up with President Trump's support. I think we're at a moment of pivotal change.
But, Senator, the Iranian government doesn't want anyone to see what's going on the ground. I saw one report that if you go out in the street right now in Iran and you're a protester, you will be shot dead immediately. So what are they doing? They're yelling from their windows, "Death to the Khamenei," and "down with the regime" from their windows so that they don't have to go down. I want to get your take on what we should be doing in that regard, because the government reportedly planning to permanently sever its citizens from the global internet. That's from the New York Post this morning, confirming that instead they wanted to have a state-run system as part of this crackdown on dissent. And then there's Greenland. The president with this bold idea. He is slapping tariffs on European nations right now, days before he's about to see many of them when he goes to Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum. Before he sees them, he's slapping tariffs on them until what he calls a complete acquisition, a complete and total acquisition of Greenland.
It's Deadpool's turn to shine.
Your reaction?
Well, let me take those one at a time. When it comes to communications, you're right that the Ayatollah is trying to do everything he can to silence the Iranian people and to keep them in a news blackout. Is shutting down television, is shutting down internet, has shut down just about all TV, although I will say it's fairly amazing. The Ayatollah has been playing in Persian Tucker Carlson's podcast, which is just a stunning statement and a powerful indictment. I will say a real game changer on that is a decision that Elon Musk made to provide Starlink to Iran and provide it free of charge. That's transformational because you know what? The Ayatollah can't shut down Starlink, and it's letting the Iranian people speak. We're getting videos, bootleg videos that are coming out via Starlink. That's really important to be able to communicate. It's one of the many ways that America has to support those who are rising up against tyrannies. When it comes to Greenland, I want to commend President Trump for being single-mindedly focused on America first, on U.S. economic interest and U.S. national security interest. I believe it is overwhelmingly in America's national interest to acquire Greenland. A year ago, as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, I chaired a hearing on the benefits to the United States of America of acquiring Greenland. Now, some folks in the press, they clutch their pearls and they say, well, what do you mean acquiring Greenland? How could that happen? Look, the whole history of America has been a history of acquiring new lands and new territories. Whether you go back to Thomas Jefferson making the Louisiana Purchase, about half of the United States of America today, or you go back to America purchasing Alaska from Russia. You want to talk about, at the time they called it Seward's Folly. It turned out to be an extraordinarily consequential purchase. Greenland has massive rare earth minerals and critical minerals. There are enormous economic benefits to America. But it's also, like Alaska, it is located on the Arctic, which is a major theater for potential military conflict with either Russia or China. It's also critical for the Golden Dome and defending America from potential missile strikes. I commend the president for focusing on American national security.
Yeah, because where it is geographically can help stop any missile fire coming from adversaries like Russia and China. Senator, it's great to catch up. We so appreciate your time. We'll be watching your work as always, sir. Thank you.
So we have, in addition to all of this, we have what's going on with Greenland. So we've got Iran issuing out those warnings today that if they attack Khamenei, that it would be a declaration of war. And we also have all the stuff going on with Greenland. So the two main things we're seeing hitting the news media outlets right now is that we could be entering into war with Iran. And also there is the potential for conflict with NATO and the United States over Greenland. And you heard him say that he believes that here we are going to see, maybe in the next 6 months, the IRGC fall. Let me know, do you agree with Ted Cruz? Do you think the IRGC is going to fall? If so, put yes. If no, put no. Let me know your thoughts. But we're hearing that Donald Trump is saying all options are on the table, and it is spreading right now in rumors that he is preparing for a strike. Now, this article coming out from the Jerusalem Post says all options are currently on the table. U.S. boosts its presence in the Middle East as Iran's strike remains a possibility. Now, Netanyahu on Sunday convened several ministers within the senior defense echelon to discuss recent developments in the region. Israeli officials believe that a U.S. strike on Iran is still an option. In fact, we're hearing that they are saying that it is imminent and a potential assassination of Khamenei could be coming. The United States Armed Forces continue to reinforce their military presence in the Middle East amid the possibility that U.S. President Donald Trump may order an attack against Iran. Aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and its strike team have reached the Strait of Malacca, located between Malaysia and Indonesia. They are expected to enter the U.S. Central Command's CENTCOM area of responsibility in 5 to 7 days. Accompanying the carrier are 2 destroyers, the USS Spruance and the USS Michael Murphy. According to the reports, an additional 12 F-15 fighter jets have arrived in Jordan over the past 24 hours. More fighter aircrafts are believed to be heading to the region, set to arrive in the near future, while cargo planes have landed at the U.S. military base in Diego Garcia. U.S. officials told the Jerusalem Post that all options are on the table. The officials added that the goal is to build a significant force in the Middle East that would provide Trump with a broad range of options should he decide to strike Iran. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also convened several ministers in the senior defense echelon on Sunday to discuss recent developments in the region. Israeli officials believe that a U.S. strike on Iran is still an option. Trump had reportedly been persuaded on Wednesday to cancel an attack on Iran, partially due to the U.S.'s limited operational ability in the region, as many American assets had to be redeployed to the Caribbean and East Asia after a 12-day war in June. Several Arab states had also reportedly informed the U.S. that they would not allow American aircraft to take off from their territory in order to strike Iran. So right now we're hearing the United States is getting everything in position. Also on Wednesday, Netanyahu held a phone call with Trump where he reportedly said that Israel was not prepared to defend itself in the event of an Iranian response to an American strike, given that the U.S. military lacked sufficient forces in the region to assist as it had done so in the past. Now, former U.S. Ambassador to Israel and Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Dan Shapiro, suggested that Trump, driven by a desire to fulfill rhetorical promises to the Iranian people, may be seeking a dramatic military exit ramp. Trump called for the Iranian people to go to the streets, promising that he would be with them, Shapiro told the Post. But when the regime killed thousands, no price was paid because the U.S. lacked the necessary forces in the region at that time. Now, according to Shapiro, that dynamic is now changing. As U.S. forces move back into the region, America's military option is being made available. Shapiro said that Trump's preferred one-and-done dramatic military-style strike could lead him to specifically target Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. What would be big and dramatic and allow him to say he fulfilled his promise it would be to eliminate the supreme leader, Shapiro said. Iranian President Mossad Pezeshkian responded in a post on X, warning that a strike against Khamenei would amount to a full-scale war with Iran. And here you can see the post on X. And as I shared with you, this is actually coming out across the news media outlets today. Now, while such a move would be popular among many Iranians, Shapiro warned of the Venezuela effect, referring to the United States' mixed results in its attempts to oust former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Shapiro cautioned that Trump often lacks the long-term commitment required for genuine regime change. He doesn't want to be pulled into a long regime change war, Shapiro said. Eliminating Khamenei is dramatic, but it wouldn't necessarily change the regime. You would likely see the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps or the IRGC take over, at least for a time. Quiet in the streets is deceiving. However, the challenge for the Trump administration is not only that it will take at least a week to assemble the forces, but also the fact that the Iranian regime has brutally suppressed. Oh, wow, the article just jumped on me. Just a second, guys. All right, so where were we? However, the challenge for the Trump administration is not only that it will take at least a week to assemble the forces, but also the fact that the Iranian regime has brutally suppressed the protesters. Now, a senior Iranian official told Reuters that more than 5,000 people were killed during the regime's crackdown over the past 2 weeks. And I actually shared with you in that last video, we heard from them saying that it could be as much as 25, 35,000 people. The reporting is questionable because right now we are hearing that we cannot confirm the numbers due to the internet shutdown. Now, given the brutal repression of the protesters and the dramatic decline in the numbers of protesters, is there any chance that an American attack, or even a prospect of one, could bring people back into the streets? Director of the Iran program at the Institute of National Security Studies and one of Israel's leading experts on Iranian domestic affairs, Dr. Raz Zimt, noted that while the fear factor currently dominates Iran, the regime's tactics are deepening the hatred that drives the protesters. Now, at first glance, it looks like there is a very wide deployment of security forces, mass arrests, and citizens who are quite afraid to leave their homes, he told the Post. However, he warned that the quiet on the streets is deceptive. Drawing a comparison to major crackdowns in 2019, he said that the current repression is building a different kind of psychological infrastructure. While the suppression might contribute to fear in the immediate term, it deepens the hostility and hatred towards the regime. He pointed to the cultural importance of mourning rituals in Iran, especially the 40th day memorial ceremonies, as a potential flashpoint. Each funeral, each memorial service has the potential to escalate, he noted. We saw in 2022 how these dates can bring thousands back to the streets. The potential for friction is growing, and this level of suppression cannot be maintained indefinitely. He also said that he does not believe that Trump's words gave the protests significant momentum. The large protests began even before Trump's statements. The strikes are usually a final push. When there are already masses of demonstrators in the streets, he added, let's assume there is an American strike now. Would that encourage the average citizen to go out and protest? It's far from certain. The fact that there is an attack does not mean that the chances of toppling the regime have increased. It depends on the type of strike. He also noted that an attack on the Islamic Republic may not lead to the regime's collapse. Rather, it could lead to a transition of leadership that does not truly dismantle the system. It's possible that whoever comes next will not be pro-Israel either, but they might feel that in order to survive, they must be pragmatic. So that coming out today, as well as we're hearing that right now, they are saying, the Supreme Leader is saying this is Trump's fault. The protesters, they are saying that Trump is their hero, but now they're feeling betrayed by Trump, saying he hasn't struck yet. But we're hearing that just because the United States has not struck yet does not mean that the United States is not going to strike. And we're seeing things like this popping up in Iran as they are waiting for Trump to strike, saying that they are hoping that help is, in fact, on the way. Now, we will see, but let's take a look at some more video footage coming out so you can see the latest.
Willie James, there are some developments when it comes to Iran. The Supreme Leader there blaming the U.S. for those protests that we've reported on. What is the president saying about that?
Well, Jerika, today the president said it's time to look for new leadership in Iran.
There was new calm on the streets of Tehran this weekend, but evidence of the recent unrest and violent crackdown remains. Today, Iran's Ayatollah said, we consider the U.S. president guilty, both for the casualties, for the damages, and for the slander he made against the Iranian nation. President Trump punching back, calling for an end to Khamenei's rule, adding the man is a sick man who should run his country properly and stop killing people. The exchange follows nationwide protests and a violent government crackdown. Thousands have been killed. President Trump had threatened to take action against the regime if it did not stop killing civilians, but on Friday praised it for sparing protesters.
Did Arab and Israeli officials convince you to not strike Iran?
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings.
And this week, satellite images showed the U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, which was rerouted to the Middle East amid those ongoing tensions with Iran. Meanwhile, the White House says the president has a range of options at his disposal. Jerika?
Willie James Enman, thank you.
So we're hearing that right now. They are still considering every type of option here. And let's take a look at this. More details on the Supreme Leader blaming Donald Trump for both the deaths and the protests as we are preparing for conflict. Let's go ahead and take a look.
An Iranian official reportedly says the government's violent crackdown on protesters has killed at least 5,000 people. Activists say the crackdown has also stalled the demonstrations for now. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst has the latest live from Tel Aviv. Trey.
John, good afternoon. Iran's supreme leader made an address on Saturday that was broadcast across state-controlled media. We know that Iran's supreme leader, for the first time, indicated that thousands of people were indeed killed during these protests as members of this audience chanted death to America and death to Israel. During the remarks, the Ayatollah Khamenei once again directly attacked President Trump, calling him a criminal.
In this revolt, the U.S. president himself intervened directly. He made remarks in person, made statements, and issued threats. He encouraged seditious people to go ahead. He sent messages from the United States to those individuals, whom I will explain later who they were, telling them to move forward and not be afraid.
Much of the day also posting about the United States and President Trump on X, to which President Trump responded, it's time to look for new leadership in Iran. While U.S. military assets head to the Middle East, reports indicate President Trump delayed strikes on Iran in part at the request of regional allies like Israel. The Israelis rely heavily on American air defense during the 12-day war last year and would need U.S. support if another war erupted.
We are operating at peak readiness for a wide range of scenarios. In recent weeks, we have strengthened capabilities and increased readiness along all borders. As the Chief of the General Staff said yesterday during his visit to the Aerial Defense Array, it is important that every Israeli citizen knows the IDF is prepared and ready at all times across a broad range of capabilities, both defensively and offensively.
The Israeli military remains on high alert in preparation for a possible war with Iran. John?
And Trey, the Ayatollah is claiming that President Trump is responsible for the deaths of those protesters, but those protesters, by and large, were killed by his own security forces, right?
Yeah, John, exactly. Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, has blamed America and President Trump for the deaths of these protesters. The reality is that the vast majority of them were killed by the IRGC or Iranian proxy forces that are currently operating on the ground inside the country.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yingst.
So there you have it, you guys. We're hearing that they are blaming the United States for this, saying that it is Trump's fault that all of this is happening and that he has American assets that have infiltrated the protests, that he is corrupting the people, and he is blaming Donald Trump for this directly, saying it is his fault. Now, we're also hearing that at this time they're saying that they are speculating that Trump could be planning an attack on him directly, as I mentioned to you when we started off, and we're going to be seeing here because they're saying all options are still on the table. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the latest as more details are coming in saying that Trump has advised an Iranian strike wouldn't guarantee a regime change. Now, this is one of the things that we had heard as Trump said, I convinced myself because they stopped the assassinations in the street. But we heard yesterday that they are now using toxic chemical attacks on the protesters. So even though they're not dying in the streets, they're dying a couple of days later. And let's go ahead and take a look as he's saying it's time to switch out the regime, but a strike might not be the thing that does it. We might need to get everything ready and prepare strategically for a regime change. Let's go ahead and take a look at the latest.
If they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard. We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping. It's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that a good authority.
Okay, is the president's position on the Iranian regime softening, or is his more subdued tone the last couple of days the quiet before the storm? Well, let's bring it back to our panel to see what they think. Welcome back, panel. So the Wall Street Journal has this headline. They say President Trump was told an attack on Iran wouldn't guarantee collapse of regime. He was advised the U.S. military would need more firepower in the Middle East to launch large strike attack and protect American forces. So Matt, listen, the president says no one convinced him, he convinced himself, but we know there are more military assets moving to the region.
Absolutely. If I was a betting man, I wouldn't be taking the over on the Ayatollah anytime soon. I mean, I think this particular instance we saw over the last week was less retreat and more restraint. I think, the president doesn't love taking pictures, to use baseball parlance, but this one was a little outside the strike zone. I think what you saw was the Iranian security apparatus held, the protests didn't really fracture the regime, and any really application of force probably would have just drove us deeper in a situation we didn't want to be in. Now, I think if the regime pops off again, if they miscalculate, doesn't mean the response this past time is going to guarantee the same response in the future. So that's what I'm watching.
Okay. Our buddy Andrew McCarthy over at National Review says this: while it is in our vital interest to see the regime deposed, it is not in our interest to achieve that outcome by a ground invasion and occupation. We can do a lot to further hollow out the regime's capacity to project power, but only the Iranian people can push it over. And Josh, that's a real heavy lift.
Well, look, one of the reasons why the administration pulled back last week is I don't think they had the military assets. They didn't have the planning for what would happen if they tried to pursue large-scale military action. I'm not so convinced that they're not still going to go ahead with it. You're seeing the buildup this week. You're seeing Senator Graham in the region talking about Trump really eager to take action. And you're hearing the Ayatollah continuing to taunt Donald Trump. And if we know one thing about President Trump is that's one thing that can spur him to act. Maduro learned that the hard way in Venezuela. So if I'm the Ayatollah, I might not be sleeping easy these next couple weeks. I do think that the military option is still on the table, and this week is going to be a very interesting one in the region.
Yeah, I mean, is Mary Catherine, is that sort of what this lull is about, is getting our things into place, or is the president really being cautioned about a potential broader conflict there that he's worried about?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, and that people are discussing whether this is sort of a rope-a-dope to get information about where Iran is. Look, the threat still exists, and I think there is a little bit for the Trump administration. They look back on 2013 in Syria and Obama's red line, 2009, the Green Movement, and many people argue like, hey, there's some maybe regime red line regret here and being worried about that. He has given encouragement himself to the Iranian protesters, which means if you don't follow up and you don't help, and I would not preclude the fact that people have been helping behind the scenes in pretty serious ways here. But if you don't help, I think part of what plays into this is his own reputation. He has cultivated a bit of a madman theory that he will act in these situations. And if he doesn't, I think he will take into account what that would do for his threat credibility.
Yeah, I mean, ask Soleimani. And the Iran nuclear program.
Well, and look, the problem is, though, if the goal is to support the protesters and ultimately get a change in regime, I do not think that American military action is the way to do that. Even with occupation and hundreds of thousands of ground troops in a place like Iraq or Afghanistan, we have seen how hard it is to force a democratic transition onto a country coming out of authoritarianism. So I think behind the scenes, helping get the internet back up, helping Iranians get some of this information out of the country, there are quiet ways that the U.S. and Israel have done for many years to weaken this regime. But the best look, once a regime has to use such a level of violence, the Iranian regime has never had to, in the last couple decades, quite frankly, kill so many protesters to stay in power. That is not a good sign for the long-term longevity. Now, can the U.S. make this happen with an airstrike that guarantees an outcome we would be happy with? There is no evidence in history. There's certainly no evidence we've ever seen that that would be the case. So the best thing we can do is support the protesters quietly, continue to weaken the Iranian regime, and not do things that cause the Iranian people to rally around the flag, like, I don't know, take more military strikes on their country.
Well, as you said, probably a lot of things happening behind the scenes, cyber attacks,
exactly,
all kinds of things, talk of
evidence
Starlink into the country.
There's also evidence that not acting militarily and not backing up threats leads to 10 to 15 more years of brutality from said regimes in those places, although it is obviously not a silver bullet to strike.
Yeah, it's not. It's not an easy call, and that's why the commander-in-chief has the toughest job in the world. So let's talk about Greenland, which he's very interested in. Here are some headlines in juxtaposition for you. The Atlantic says Trump is risking a global catastrophe. His irrational fixation on Greenland could lead to widespread conflict. An opinion piece over at FoxNews.com says Trump knows good real estate and he knows Greenland's value to national security. Trump has lit a bonfire under Denmark and NATO to spur much needed progress to counter Russia and China. And Josh, could that be the end game here? Let's beef up forces, let's get more serious, or do you think he actually wants that for the U.S.?
No, I think he wants it for the U.S., and that's causing a rupture with our European allies in a way that could have very serious long-term consequences. It also doesn't have a whole lot of public support in the United States. There was a poll by Quinnipiac that came out this week. Less than 10% of Americans want us to use any kind of military action to get Greenland for the United States. There is a diplomatic way to have Denmark offer more territory to help with our national security needs, but I don't think we've been looking to go in that direction. And you can hear that the Europeans and you see from the Denmark leadership, there's panic on what the intentions of the United States are. So this is one of those moves. I understand that there are opportunities economically and for national security reasons that Greenland's an important region for the United States. To threaten military action is something that causes a lot of backlash.
Well, Matt, we've seen a lot of pushback, and especially when the president dropped those tariff threats yesterday.
Yeah, no, all the hysteria from the media, the Europeans, Democrats helps increase the leverage. Like, we're not rolling in like Patton into Bastogne into Greenland. We're not making the 51st state. This is going to end with some deal on rare earths or security cooperation. He'll go there for a photo op. Look, I'm not a parent, but I know many of you guys are. I think of it when parents count to 3. At 3, they need to believe there's a consequence. Otherwise, behavior doesn't change. So the hysteria feeds into the leverage to extract more, I think, from a lot of these concessions we're seeing.
And by the way, Canada has dibs on 51st state.
That's true.
So before it goes to Greenland.
I mean, I hope you're right. But I think if he continues down this path, if he puts tariffs on our allies to try and pressure them to give us a place we do not need for any security reason, this will be the end of NATO. This will reinforce the idea that might makes right, that you can conquest other places. Russia can take Ukraine, China can take Taiwan. It is at odds with everything from American foreign policy since World War II.
10 seconds.
In the end, do I think the founders envisioned that you could use emergency tariffs to bully allies into giving you territory? No, I do not. And I think it's incumbent upon a president to make an argument for this and go through the diplomatic channels to do so.
Yeah, and we'll see if the polls change about how people feel about the argument here at home. Okay, thank you, panel. We'll see you next Sunday. Straight ahead.
There you have it. Now, let me know your thoughts. As I mentioned, right now, the two main things that are coming out across the headlines today, January 18th, 2026, is Iran saying that they will declare war if the United States were to strike or were to try to assassinate Khamenei, the supreme leader. There will be official declaration of war. We're hearing that nothing is off the table yet. And also, Greenland. We're hearing that Donald Trump is saying we need Greenland. It is a matter of national security for the United States, but they're saying this could cause a rift between us and the NATO allies, and things are drastically changing throughout the region on the opinions of the United States and NATO. We're hearing that this could cause some major issues, but he's saying we need it, and if we don't get it, China or Russia is going to be in line to take over Greenland, and whoever controls it will have a strategic advantage in the Arctic. So let me know your thoughts. Should we control Greenland? If you think so, put USA in the comments. If you think no, put NATO in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Love to hear what you think about this. This is a huge topic that we're going to be hearing a whole lot more of here. But also, take a look here. We're also seeing that the Iranian leader, they have now officially come out and said they have acknowledged that thousands upon thousands of people have died in the protests, and the reports are varying. We're hearing that it could be 20, 30,000. Some outlets are just saying 3,000, 5,000, but now they're saying it could be as much as 30-something thousand, but we still cannot verify. Let's take a look at the latest video footage.
Iran's supreme leader is publicly acknowledging the steep death toll among anti-government demonstrators during widespread protests that have rocked that country. Let's bring in Fox News chief foreign correspondent Trey Yingst. He is in Israel with all the latest. Hello, Trey.
Shannon, good morning. Iranian officials now admit the death toll from protests since late December now stands at more than 5,000. That number is expected to rise. On Saturday, Iran's supreme leader spent much of the day blaming America for demonstrations in Iran and making remarks broadcast on state television where he called President Trump a criminal.
The nature of the sedition, this sedition was American. It was clear. The Americans planned and acted. The aim of the Americans, and I am stating this clearly and unequivocally with 40-odd years of experience in the Islamic Republic, is to swallow Iran.
In an interview with Politico, President Trump responded by saying it's time to look for new leadership in Iran. Much of the Iranian diaspora has called for new leadership to be Reza Pahlavi, the exiled prince.
The Islamic Republic is close to collapse. Ali Khamenei and his thugs know this. That's why they are lashing out like a wounded animal, desperate to cling to power. The people have not retreated.
Amid talks of regime change and the positioning of U.S. military assets, reports indicate that President Trump decided to delay a strike against Iran, in part at the request of regional allies, including Israel. The United States played a major role in shooting down Iranian missiles last year during the 12-day war and would need to assist if another conflict develops.
We are operating at peak readiness for a wide range of scenarios. In recent weeks, we have strengthened capabilities and increased readiness along all borders.
If a donation makes sense for you right now, I'm asking you to pitch in to the Democratic Party.
Here in Israel, the military remains on high alert, preparing for the possibility of war with Iran. Shannon?
All right, Trey Yingst reporting from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Trey, always. Joining me now, Senator John Cornyn of Texas, member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, welcome.
Thanks, Shannon.
Oh, let's start here. Politico said yesterday, President Trump said Saturday, he called for an end to the Ayatollah's 37-year reign. He says it's time to look for new leadership in Iran. What does that mean to you as far as U.S. involvement in what's been playing out on the streets there? What are you comfortable with? What would the president need to come to Congress for, based on what actions he decides to take?
Well, as you know, since 1979, the Iranian Revolution, Iran has been at war with the West and has American blood on its hands in Iraq and of course, has threatened to wipe Israel off the map and developed a nuclear weapons program that thankfully President Trump had the courage and decisiveness to step in and set back months, if not years. So obviously, the Iranian people are the ones that are on the losing end of this proposition. So far, the sanctions regime that the president has put into place has weakened the economy, exerting maximum pressure on the regime. But he has multiple options, and only he knows which of those options he will choose. But I'm glad to see him standing up for these protesters. And the numbers, of course, if the regime is saying 5,000, you know it's much more than that, of people who've had the courage to step up and speak out against this tyrannical regime.
Would you support military action? I think of your GOP colleague, Senator Lindsey Graham, who says he hopes it's a big move on Iran.
Well, I think, among the options the president has is to strike the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And of course, during the 12-day war, the run-up to that, Israel did basically decapitated the leadership of the IRGC, which is the most aggressive and most militant aspect of the Iranian state. So it depends on what it is. I don't know what it is, but the president does have constitutional authority, certainly, to protect our troops and interests in the region. And so I don't think he's going to need permission from Congress to do that. This has been a subject of endless debate over years, decades, really. But he knows what options he's considering, and I think we're all going to have to wait and learn.
Okay, so another foreign policy hotspot, Greenland. The president makes clear he intends to move forward with some kind of ownership or purchase or control of Greenland. He put out on Truth Social yesterday that he is going to enact a 10% tariff on a number of different countries he believes are standing in the way of this, saying it'll go to 25% June 1st and continue until the U.S. reaches a deal to buy Greenland. Your Senate GOP colleague, Tom Tillis, who just traveled over there in a bipartisan delegation to try to smooth things over with Denmark, he says this is bad for America, it's bad for American businesses, it's bad for our allies, and it undermines all the work President Trump's actually done to strengthen NATO. What's your take on this Greenland debate?
Well, Greenland is strategically located, as you know, and as the Chinese and the Russians have been increasingly active in the Arctic, otherwise known as the High North, I think the president rightly understands that this is a strategically important piece of real estate. But Greenland and the Danes have been our allies for a long time now. The president is the consummate deal maker, and I think he's looking for a deal. Sometimes he believes in strategic ambiguity and talks in terms that get people's attention. But ultimately, I think there's a deal to be made, and I'm glad that Secretary Rubio and the Vice President have been engaging the Danes, because this is something we should be able to do in the best interests of both countries.
Well, what about the suggestion that there could be a military action with respect to Greenland? As you mentioned, Denmark, a NATO ally of ours. Congressman Don Bacon, Republican over on the House side, says, I mean, he thinks that's impeachable by Republicans or Democrats if this administration did that.
I don't think that's on those cards are on the table. I think this is going to be a negotiated outcome. Again, President Trump's the deal maker, and I expect him to make a deal.
Okay, let's talk Venezuela while we've got you. Who do you think should be in leadership of that country right now? I mean, the White House is talking with Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president, but she was Maduro's number two. The president also met this week with opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. Who do you think should be in charge?
Well, first of all, I can't, the way that the United States military acted in support of this law enforcement action, which is what it was, to arrest Nicolas Maduro was nothing short of magnificent. But the president said that we've learned the lessons from Iraq, that collapsing the existing governing regime and creating an insurgency can result in a long war that they are trying to avoid in Venezuela. The good news is the president has multiple levers to use with Delcy Rodriguez. And I know that Secretary Rubio and more recently the CIA director were down there talking to her. This is going to be a multi-year transition, but I think in the end it will be a much better outcome for the people of Venezuela, and it will result in them not being the source of drugs that come into the United States and cause untold human misery.
I want to try to get to a couple of domestic issues as well. You're in a heated GOP primary run down in Texas to maintain your Senate seat.
So there you have it, you guys. A lot of conflicts taking place right now. We have Iran, we have the issues with Greenland, and then also, as she mentioned, Maduro was captured, and now we have Venezuela as well. So a lot taking place right now, and we're going to be seeing where we go from here. Now, as I mentioned to you to start off the broadcast, we had heard that Iran has warned that an attack on Khamenei, it would be a declaration of war. The president has issued a warning. Pezeshkian has warned amid the speculation that Donald Trump plans to assassinate the supreme leader or remove him, that this would be a all-out declaration of war. And as I mentioned to you as well, we are hearing that right now that there are calls for them to remove them. The people of Iran are requesting it. And take a look here. Anti-regime activists also hacked Iran's national broadcast, transmitted Pahlavi, the exiled crown prince, to encourage protesters to continue on. The United States is saying all options are on the table. Even though we have not hit yet, doesn't mean that we won't. We're seeing pictures like this on the streets in Tehran, and it says, we hoped that Trump would help, that the help would arrive. Protesters are starting to feel betrayed, wondering when is it that Trump is going to strike, and the order has not come. Behind the scenes of Trump's Iranian pullback, why he has not struck yet. But let me know your thoughts. We're hearing that the Abraham Lincoln, the SS Abraham Lincoln, it is still en route and will be there in the next 5 to 7 days. And when it arrives, all things might be in position for an attack. Do you think that the United States, Donald Trump, is going to strike Iran? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. But whatever unfolds, I'll be sure to let you know here on the channel. There is a lot going on, so stay tuned. Pretty much doing daily updates now. Turn on the notification on the subscribe button, because I don't have a set time. Just as the news breaks, we go live. So stay tuned to the channel. I'll keep you up to speed on everything. Hit that like button if you haven't done so yet. It helps out the channel a ton. And also additional resources going to be linked in the description below. And I saw people asking on my opinion on things, and I wanted to let people know that in addition to the Bible channel, the Holy KJV Bible channel, where I'm going to be reading the Bible, releasing every Thursday new chapters of the King James Version of the Bible, we are also doing Focus Point News. And if you look that up on YouTube, you'll be able to see a picture of my face. There's only one video on there, but we're going to start releasing opinion pieces for people that are interested in hearing opinions. But right here, it's going to be news updates. So we're going to keep that separate. But if you're interested, check that out as well. More on the way. I'll keep you up to speed on everything. Thank you guys so much for joining me this late Sunday evening. I'll continue to keep you up to speed. Catch you in the next one. Take care. God bless. This is Steve.